What I would encourage CMOs to do is you've got to engage in early stage buying behavior. If you wait to let the buyer go through 70, 80% of the buying cycle, which some of them are happy to do. We let the buyer engage whenever they want to engage. Buyers don't want to engage in the early stage. Not true. Buyers are happy to have conversations with vendors if vendors add value relative to where they're at.
Welcome to Connect to Market. I'm Casey Cheshire. Join us as we learn from marketing leaders who are driving founder-led growth. We're sponsored by Ringmaster, building B2B podcasts and communities to reconnect you with your audience. Here we go, a very spooky podcast coming at you. Of course, by the time this airs, it'll be weeks later, and you'll be like, Casey, what's going on? Well, today it is Halloween, and we are going to scare you with some amazing information because my guest today is an absolute legend. He is a badass, and he scares the ghosts away. He scares the marketing ghosts away. He is the guy. Who is he, Casey? Who is he? A B2B marketing thought leader, a GTM trailblazer, a speaker. He's influential in the system. He actually won the award for B2B Innovator of 2020 and Best Customer Marketing in 2024. Top 1% LinkedIn trainer, principal and founder of Go-to-Market Pros, Michael Phelan. Welcome to the show, sir.
Well, thanks for having me on. So kind of you to make those nice comments, and happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Yeah, man. So tell me, in order for me to ask you this question, I need to use yet another prop on Halloween and put on this giant blue foam finger. And I need to ask you, Michael, what is the number one thing that marketers need to do in order to connect to their market?
Yeah, that has changed a lot, but most recently, pointing out that a company is underperforming their best-in-class peers in terms of doing the job. So whatever job you're selling, if you're selling, helping a company do a better forecasting process, if you can demonstrate that their forecasting process is much weaker than their key competitor, and that you understand where they're at, where their competitor is at, what the performance gaps is, and the fact that they're underperforming. Underperforming could mean I'm using too much resources. It could mean I'm got a very inefficient process. It could mean I'm not getting the outputs. And anytime you point out to a company that they're either leaving money on the table, running an inefficient process, but it's the comparison to their best-in-class peers and competitors that really motivates them to take action and engage.
Wow. So, I've definitely heard folks say, well, don't talk about your competitors. But man, we neglect this. Why do we neglect this area so much?
It's not the company that's selling those competitors, it's the customer's competitors, right?
Yes.
So when you, I've done a lot of work in different segments, but for example, when you're talking to a company like Target, and you're looking to sell, say, marketing technology, there is areas of marketing that Target really focused on and understand. So one is advanced marketing personalization. And I was talking to the head of Target that buys all the Target marketing technology. And I said to him, how many people reach out to you on an average day? And he said, maybe 80 or 100. And I said, how many people do you meet in an average month? He said, one or two. And I said, well, why do you meet with the ones that you meet with? And he said, it's always the same thing. You know, we are focused on making improvements to getting the job done, different processes such as advanced marketing personalization. And when companies approach us based on a process we care about, that's important. But when they can point out, you know, a deficit versus best in class or versus Sephora, who's the number one in the world in advanced marketing personalization, that's even more important. So the Target guy said, if you can answer the question that we get asked in executive committee meetings or in the board, and we get asked that on every time. Why is Sephora number one in advanced marketing personalization? Why are we number 14? We know that has an impact on our sales, a huge impact. What are you doing to solve that?
You were talking about best practice studies and benchmarks, and that helping answer questions that the board is constantly being asked, or you're being asked by the board.
Mhm.
what makes for what turns just a regular post or blog or downloadable into like a really good practice study or benchmark?
Yeah, so good example is a company called Sail Through, and they are also in advanced marketing personalization. And what they did is they were having a problem meeting with the top 100 retailers, and it's very difficult to get meetings with those guys. And what they did was they said, well, let's go ahead and rank and rate all these retailers. Let's do an independent study. And let's actually look at their website. Let's look at their loyalty programs. Let's interview their customers. Let's do research. And then let's come up with a way of ranking these retailers from 1 to 100. And the minute they did that, every single retailer on that 100 list wanted to meet with them. And what was interesting, it wasn't just the people they sold to that wanted to meet with them. So they wanted to talk to the CEO, not the CEO, the CMO. But as the ranking developed and as it became important, retailers started to report on where they were on the ranking every year. And they would get invited into the C suite, CEO, sometimes investors, sometimes board members, sometimes investor relations. And this became a tracking system. And they did it for years and years and years. And they went from a brand nobody heard of to the most desired brand. So the content that they created and ranking was so efficient at getting meetings. And in fact, retailers would wait for this to come out. No other analyst company was doing this kind of ranking. So they became the analyst for their industry, the most trusted resource. And they get asked the question all the time, how do you, in fact, help us do a better job of advanced marketing personalization? And they're smart enough to say that they don't solve everything in advanced marketing personalization. They would say, this is what we can do for you, but we'd recommend you do these other things. And here's some other companies that do that very well too. So don't try
Yeah.
and overpromise, know what you do, but we're willing to help the customer understand other pieces of the solution that other vendors can help them with as well.
Why don't more people do this? Is it just hard?
It's a strategic initiative. A lot of
Yeah.
people are just looking for short-term programs to spike sales or to spike the pipeline. So, and so you have to have a strategic view to do this. B, you have to have a multi-year view to do this, and you have to be willing to do it right and credible. So there's a bunch of reasons why I think a lot of marketing people, they're into short-term lead gen. And what's our next campaign? And they don't have the strategic, broader vista to do it. Also, you have to understand the analyst market and understand the benchmarking market. Now, this can be done on an individual basis too. I do a program called Moderated Prospect Meetings, where I'll actually personally interview all of the key prospects with my client, who's the sponsor of the study, and we'll ask them questions about how they're solving the problem right now. What's their process? What's their input? What's their process? What's their output? And then on the back half of the call, my client then will recommend custom recommendations. So they'll say, well, we had a client just like you with that same problem. Here's what we did. Here are some of the results we got. Now, keep in mind, I still haven't pushed the product yet. I still haven't said why my company's so great. So this is like reacting to the customer about how you're improving the jobs to be done and process, which is a more strategic view. And then the customer will say, well, how can you help me? And that's really what you want to do is you want to be called into the sale. You want to be asked to pitch.
My brain is smoking a little bit, and I understand I got to stretch a little bit. I don't know much about the analyst market or the benchmarking market, but I understand the importance of stretching and providing strategic insight for your customers in this way. How do you get started on this path to being more like an analyst for your customer?
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of, when I was working with a company, they were Plum Choice, and I would schedule analyst meetings, and I would look at my clients attending analyst meetings, and I would go to things like IDC and Gartner, and I was amazed at how many of these big brands were at the table and wanted to hear from analysts. So I said, well, why couldn't I bring the analyst to the table? So one of the first things I did on an analyst program is I negotiated with an analyst firm. I'd like you to do 50 prospect meetings with me. And I would reach out to the prospect and say, would you like to talk to the top analysts in the business about where this is going, what best practices are, and what some of your competitors are doing? And they all jumped to the table. And the fact that we now are bringing a key prospect or client to the table with a key analyst was getting us high level meetings. And part of that is the analyst is going to be very nice to me, to my company, because A, I'm their client, and B, I've scheduled a meeting and I've created a new relationship with. So they not only will talk about the growth of the market, but they'll be complimentary about my company. And so it was a beautiful forum. So I said, well, wow, if you've got something so valuable as that, how do you package it up into a program? So we packaged it up into a program for prospects. And then I noticed after, you probably know Serious Decisions, right? When they got bought. But a lot of people at Serious Decisions, they were the best analyst company in the country in terms of demand gen. They got bought and absorbed, I believe, by Forrester. But a lot of those analysts didn't really want to go to Forrester. They didn't want to work as part of a bigger entity. So many of them got snapped up by companies who said, I'm going to hire an analyst. So that's another way of doing it. So you can create your own analyst, you can hire an analyst, you can partner up with an analyst, you can play the role of an analyst, you could do a benchmarking study. There's a lot, but the more credibility and independence you have to help the customer do a job better. And a lot of it is customers don't really even understand what their process to do the job is. So I'm working
Okay.
with a company right now, a fintech, and we're visualizing the process. And the customers are like, wow, that's how our process works. It looks incredibly complicated. Is there any way you can make this more efficient? And the answer is yes, absolutely. It's a very convoluted process. It wasn't well designed. Here's the right process. And if we move to the right process with the right technology, we'll get these kinds of results. So you're really helping the customer. There's a lot of people, what I call, have hidden intent. They're not necessarily shopping for an individual company. So the
Yeah.
company, but they really want to do a better job and they really want to do a better process, and they know they're not that efficient. And any chance that they get to figure that out, they're very engaged with it. So they have intent. They want to do the job better. They're just not actively shopping because they don't know what to shop for, or they don't know what direction to shop in.
Yeah.
And want to shop in the direction of best practices.
So yeah, you could certainly just, hire an analyst. But if you want to step into that, like what's the first thing I should do? I mean, is it just talking to as many customers as possible, talking to the industry?
Well, one of the things that I've realized too is that, buyers now are really shutting down attempts to engage them on demos. And, everything from AI has made it explosive. So there's so much clutter now. When
Absolutely.
buyers see a company reaching out to them, or even if it's the founder or the vice president of sales or a BDR, they view that as a sales pitch, and they don't
Yeah.
view it as that helpful.
What role does community play in all of this? Or does it? Or does one get formed by having so many conversations?
Yeah, which community are you talking about? Are you talking about the community of buyers? Are you talking about the community of sellers or marketers or sales?
Yeah. Yep. Like, yeah, all the above. Just the concept of even community.
Yeah, you can take, if you take the community. I do a workshop on 30 different ways of adding value to prospects.
Yeah.
And one of the ways of adding value to prospects is to create a prospect community. And that could be anything from, you know, you could run your own event. If you look at HubSpot, they created inbound marketing, probably one of the best examples. So much so that they've got, had Michelle Obama level speakers, and it became this huge event. So if you create a process and you can mobilize everybody about a new way of doing things, and you can create a customer forum. It could be a customer conference. It could be an online community. But if you can gravitate people to a new vision, to a new way of doing things, to a new way of sharing, that can be very powerful. Um, when I go to events, and I'm working with a company, we'll often do a VIP dinner at an event, and we'll have an analyst or an association member or a customer speak. We'll have a private room. We'll have a little bit of maybe a half an hour of Q&A, maybe with slides, maybe not. Get the crowd asking questions, interacting, and then we'll have a kind of a social thing. So bringing together communities in fun, interactive ways, online and offline, is very powerful. But the one that's probably done it the best is HubSpot, and they became the de facto, way of generating leads through inbound marketing. Now it's under challenge now because it's much more difficult to convert now than it was before.
Yeah.
But a few years ago, inbound marketing was really the way of doing things.
Yeah, really. So as things continue to change, because change is inevitable, what excites you about the future?
Um, I think what excites me about the future, I love using AI. And I find, ChatGPT and tools like that so helpful. And every time I use it, I'm always surprised by how good it is and how much better it is. And I had a funny story just to test it. I said, well, what if I asked ChatGPT to write a little blog on the top 10 ways of generating leads for B2B companies? And it came back with an unbelievable result, and even better than I might have been able to write myself. And I was like, wow, that's pretty good. And I agreed with everything, and I
Really?
read it in real detail. Like there was no errors in it. And so I said, well, let's for fun, let me just publish this. So I published it on LinkedIn, and I got a funny response from a guy who said to me, I love this piece. He said, I've been reading your stuff for years. This is the best one you've ever written. So I
Oh,
had to laugh. Um, but it's that good. So we have tools now that are very advanced. Search is changing a lot from obviously from Google that they recommended, here are 5 sites that you need to visit, to a much better way of answering questions. So there's a lot of very interesting pieces to it. I think the challenges for marketers is that they need to much better understand how to add value to buyers. And today they don't. A lot of playbooks are not interesting to buyers. And it's much harder for salespeople to generate meetings than ever before. So my thing is leadership needs to step up to the plate, throw out the old models, be much more open to innovative thinking and ways of doing things. And I think a lot of them are, I call it they're on a bike, and they tell everybody just pedal faster, but they're on a stationary bike.
right.
And so they're models of just cranking out BDRs, cranking out content, trying to fill pipeline, trying to fill demos. That model is really broken.
Yeah.
But they're still on those stationary bikes riding away. So what I would encourage CMOs to do is you've got to engage in early stage buying behavior. If you wait to let the buyer go through 70, 80% of the buying cycle, which some of them are happy to do. We let the buyer engage whenever they want to engage. Buyers don't want to engage in the early stage. Not true. Buyers are happy to have conversations with vendors if vendors add value relative to where they're at. So what happens is if you don't engage until late stage, then McKinsey type companies, IBM, get every deal, because the buyers will always go with the biggest, most stable, longest term company in the business, safest, right? Less risk. But that company may not be the best company in 2 years. They may not be the best company for you right now. Maybe they were good at something 2 or 3 years ago, but they're no longer good at it. Maybe some of the best people have left that organization. Maybe they've cut their development, whatever it may be. Maybe they've strategically changed, and it's not even an important segment to them, but they still have people out there selling it. So you really got to find the right company for you. And so buyers are more inclined to back off do more of it themselves. But it's also dangerous for buyers because there may be great solutions out there they're not finding out about. So we as really innovative companies have to add substantially more value to buyers in the early stage, and we have to look at best practices associated with that. So I'm excited that that companies will start to look at that, but I'm also concerned that they're just stuck in the ways that they did in the past of just ramp the BDR team, ramp the content, ramp the technology, and everything will be great. Well, everything's not great. So I'm just wondering how long it's going to take them to realize that they need to change and be willing to think differently and act differently. Right now, I don't think a lot of them are. And I think
Mm,
their pipelines are suffering.
absolutely. Yeah, and the problem will only get worse in that. Well, my next question really to you is like, who are you? How do you know these things? Can you take me back in time, little Michael days? Did you know you're going to be a thought leader, teaching other marketers, showing us the way, pointing to the future? What was it like?
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I started my career in B2C,
Yep. Okay.
companies like Polaroid, Reebok, Staples, and I really enjoyed the excitement of B2C. But then I got involved in tech and a lot of SaaS companies, kind of heading up sales and marketing, and then right around when I was age 40, I was interviewing for several CMO type positions and I was coming in number 2 all the time.
Really?
And I was coming in number 2 to somebody that was 25 or 30, with a lot less experience. And I kind of said, wow, there is a huge amount of age discrimination in marketing. In fact, it's quite difficult for anybody over 40 to get a CMO role now. There's a bunch of reasons why that is, and some of it's correct and some of it's not. But at that point, I said, maybe I can add much more value than just be the guy in the seat. Maybe I can add much broader value. So I saw go to market as really badly managed. Sometimes you had a head of sales, sometimes you had a head of marketing, but go to market, it still actually is badly managed because yes, you've got sales ops right now. Yes, you've got sales enablement right now. And yes, sometimes you have an SRO that's heading up sales and marketing, but you still don't have a good GTM motion because it's stuck between the product teams, the sales teams, the marketing teams, the CEO. So I found that a lot of customers, didn't really understand the market that well. They didn't understand their prospects that well and their customers that well. So could I help them understand that? So I've done market assessments. I've helped companies come into the US. And because I've got a sales and marketing and business unit and product background, I've kind of have the discipline across those. But by and large, most executives don't spend enough time with customers
Mm,
or with prospects. And many marketing executives spend little or no time with prospects. Like if you ask the CMO, when's the last time you had lunch with a prospect? When's the last time you had a chat with a prospect? Even getting into the sales meetings, a lot of times they don't even get into the prospect meetings. So what I think has to happen is CMOs have to have their own research track and they have to have their own continuous engagement with both customers and prospects that's not designed to sell, that's designed to listen, to understand, to pressure test. So I find companies that get more and more engagement, they're more successful. So it's just that short-term thinking. We've got to. Not every interaction is a sale or should be a sale. But if you have more interactions and you're listening and testing, you're going to get more sales. So I really enjoy helping companies figure things out, be more effective. I really enjoy when companies take on new things they've never done before. And I can get a company that's very traditional, that now is trying something that is state of the art and advanced. So the reason why I come up with this stuff is because I've managed analyst programs, I've managed market research, I've managed product development, I've done sales, I've done marketing. So in my mind, I'm blending all of these things together and saying, from a buyer perspective, what's most interesting to them. But it comes out of having that experience with all of those type of programs and then putting on a buyer-centric view and saying, what is it that buyers want and need? And so I enjoyed putting together the moderated prospect meeting program. I've been doing it for 2 years. I've done it with about 50 different clients. And what I love is I love talking to the buyers. And I love talking to the buyers with my client. And we learn a lot, learn a lot about different technologies, different companies, different industries. And about 20% of my work is nonprofit,
Mm.
which is B2C, which is completely different. And that kind of keeps me in the B2C realm, where there's also a lot of innovation as well. And sometimes innovation comes from B2C into B2B.
Yeah, it does, and the fact that your career started that way and then morphed into what it is now, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's easy. People are conservative right now. They're slow to bring outside consultants in. They're looking to do everything with their existing resources. Some of them are looking to cut. So if you're a consultant or if you're an outside entity, it's certainly a challenging market to get companies to spend externally. However, if your current people are not engaging your B2B buyers effectively and also your customers, then you really need to look at your total spend. And if the team hasn't been able to get the answers internally, then doubling down and putting more pressure on them is not the right thing to do. Allowing them to bring outside thinking. You think about we brought marketing in-house. If you think about it, traditionally, there was always agencies in companies, B2B agencies, B2C agencies. And all of a sudden technology came along and it became all about the technology. And we have people who can make the trains run on time, I say. They're very good at marketing ops. They're very good at lead management. They have all the metrics and the dashboard and all that's great. But the people that are really good at that are also really bad at creativity and really bad at innovation. They're good at technology creativity, but they're not good at creativity in terms of engaging prospects and customers. So we have to realize that, we've driven the creativity out of the organization. At the same time, we've become more efficient and effective. At the same time, we got better metrics. But the one metric that really matters that companies don't even measure is how many customer discovery meetings did you have last year? How many custom prospect discovery meetings did you have last year? How does that compare to this year? Why is it up? Why is it down? And what are you going to do about it? I guarantee you most marketers don't even know what that number is. And funny thing about it is most salespeople don't even know what that number is. So we're looking at hundreds of metrics. We're buried in metrics, but the one that's most important, which is that high value interaction, that high value exchange of insights, that learning that happens, that's the one that's hurting most. And that's the one that BDOs struggle with most. And that's the no one that they're not focused on at all. So that's a huge issue. When you talk to CMOs, they make a lot of excuses for that. They say, well, we let the buyer engage when they want to engage. Wrong. Or they say, well, we'll engage late when the buyer's ready. Wrong. Or we're going to have so many more great meetings that it will compensate for our lack of conversion or a lack of numbers. Wrong. So they make a lot of excuses for this. And the reason why they make so many excuses is because they don't have a solution for it or they're not focused on it. So the C-suite, the CEO should be I have a CEO client and he asks sales a question. He goes, here's 100 people I want to sell to. And how many meetings do we have this week with that 100? And the answer was 0. And he goes, how many meetings do we have this month with those 100? The answer was 0. And then the sales guy says, well, look at all the people in our pipeline. He goes, I don't care about any of those. Tell them we're not interested. And the sales guy sat right down. He goes, this is who we're interested in. This is who I want you to meet with. And so after working with them for 2 months, they didn't get a single meeting with one of those. So that's when they called me in, and I got them into 95 of the meetings. But it drove that level of pressure for the CEO to say, why are we meeting with our customers and our prospects on a continuous basis? Show me the list of meetings that you have. And it drove them to say, we need outside help. But it also has to be the CEO driving that. And a lot of times the CEO is not driving that. The CEO is obsessed with current pipeline, much of which is not interesting, at least 40% of which will never buy anything. So I it's got to start at the top. If it started at the top, the right solution would come down. If it's stuck to sales only, sometimes sales wants to do it, but marketing doesn't want to do it. Sometimes marketing wants to do it, but sales doesn't want to do it. And the other thing I find now, which is interesting, is bandwidth issue. We've cut staff. We have everybody running around. There are great ideas that these companies could do, but they don't feel they got the bandwidth, and they haven't been given the license to drop a bunch of stuff. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said, "We're doing 20 things in marketing. None of them are working, but we're too busy to take anything new on." I said, "Well, let me solve that problem for you.
Mhm.
Stop doing everything you're doing right now. Eliminate everything and do one thing that works." And they were still resistant to do that. And the CMO was very protective of what we're doing, and very pushing back and things like that, very defensive on new things. The sales guys want to do new
Yeah.
things, but they don't want to manage the new things. They want to make the decision, but they want marketing to do it for them. So there's a lot of issues internally and externally. But the biggest thing is, if what you're doing isn't working, throw everything out and try one new thing. It's much smarter. But to get companies to admit that and to make that decision, and especially since some of the things that they're doing were the things that they recommended to solve the problem, and it's not solving the problem. So what they're doing is they're trying to optimize systems that are not working. They're trying to tweak things that were never right to begin with,
Yeah.
and they're always trying something new. But we have to be willing to throw everything out and try brand new stuff. And I like to find companies that are innovative enough and honest enough, and to just let go of stuff, because we got to free up capacity. Right now there's a limited capacity, so that's the more strategic kind of issues. It's everybody thinks marketing are high risk guys. I actually think marketing are relatively
I
conservative.
agree.
And they're very concerned that things will break, and things won't work, and they're very attached to what they've done in the past, which is the definition of low risk people. So I think marketing have to really step up. They have to own the prospect customer relationship. They have to own the insights. They have to come with the programs such as benchmarking. And right now, I don't see them approaching things in a programmatic perspective. And when I say programmatic, benchmarking is a programmatic, moderated prospect meeting is a programmatic. Some of the things we talked about are programmatic. They're ongoing, strategic, high value. So they need to step into that and not totally get lost in the minutia of managing all the metrics day to day.
Yeah, man. Dude, so powerful. Where can people reach out if they want to connect with you, learn from you, hire you, all the things?
Yeah, so my website is Go to Market Pros. It's GOTO Market MARKET
Okay.
PROS.com. And I'm certainly Michael Phelan on LinkedIn. I have 30,000 people in my network, so I'm always willing to connect and share best practices. I publish a lot on LinkedIn, so connect with me on LinkedIn, and happy to have a conversation with folks. Happy to share the best practices of those programs. Happy to, at no charge, to go over these programs and have a conversation. If the company wants to take them and run with them, that's fine. If they need me to help them get them up and running, that's fine
Yeah.
too. So love to talk to innovative sales and marketing people. And I think customer support and customer success are interesting functions too that we neglect. They know more about how customers implement programs. So as sales and marketing executives, we need to bring those people more to the table. We need to listen more to them. They're the ones that know how programs get implemented,
Mhm.
and how customer success is. And they need help to take those stories and expand them across prospects, expand them across customers. So I was in a marketing ops meeting, dinner last night, and I heard a lot of them saying, "We get great ideas, but nobody listens to us. We get great ideas, but nobody invites us to the table." I actually think that if you talk to prospects, they're much more interested in talking to sales engineers than they are salespeople. Because the sales engineers know how to implement, know how things work, they know how the operations work. So let's bring forward and raise up the people that are closest to the customer to help make marketing and sales more effective.
And dude, thank you so much for coming on here. I know we had some internet things here and there, but man, the content was thick, and I've got some takeaways over here. I'm excited to really to lean into the idea of the analyst and providing that value to customers. So, Michael, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Casey.
All right, and those if you're listening, and you learn something, then share this episode. One person, 9 people, 3,000 people. Either way, it's good information. Get that into other people's hands. And with that, Michael, thanks you again.
Thank you, Casey.
All right, everyone. It's been another crazy cool, very exciting episode of the Connect to Market Pod. We will see you all next time. And that wraps up another episode. Thank you for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at connecttomarket.com. Connect to Market is sponsored by Ringmaster, creating podcasts and communities that create relationships, generate revenue, and drive growth.